What you are about to hear began with a single question, one so direct, so unexpected, that the entire room froze before anyone fully processed what had just been asked. Senator John Kennedy leaned forward, locked eyes with the Secretary of Homeland Security, and said something no one anticipated hearing out loud. "You secured the border, didn't you?" On the surface, it sounded almost harmless, but everyone in the room understood immediately that it wasn't really a question. It was a challenge, and within moments, that single sentence triggered one of the most intense exchanges seen in a recent congressional hearing. After a brief interruption, Kennedy repeated himself. Had the southern border been secured? The secretary answered yes. Kennedy followed up, noting that the response clearly upset some of his colleagues. He asked whether critics were angry because the border was secured the wrong way or because it was secured at all. The secretary responded that critics were upset because President Trump enforced the law quickly and effectively. Kennedy then turned to President Biden's first actions in office, pointing out that many enforcement measures designed to stop illegal crossings were rolled back immediately. According to the secretary, Democratic lawmakers supported those decisions and openly celebrated them. Kennedy pressed further, asking how many people were allowed into the country illegally under those policies. The secretary estimated the number could be as high as 20 million, an influx equivalent to adding multiple states' worth of population. Kennedy framed the situation bluntly. Either the administration and its supporters genuinely believe in open borders, or the people placed in charge of border security were so incompetent they couldn't manage even the simplest operation. He dismissed incompetence as unlikely, arguing that experienced border officials were deliberately prevented from doing their jobs. The exchange grew more pointed as Kennedy asked whether border enforcement was viewed as discriminatory. The secretary agreed, stating that many migrants were allowed entry and immediately granted parole status without proper vetting. According to his testimony, this approach created serious risks, allowing criminals, known terrorists, and individuals released from prisons and mental institutions in other countries to enter the United States unchecked. By the time the exchange ended, the message was unmistakable. What began as a seemingly simple question had exposed a deep divide over border policy, enforcement, and responsibility, one that left the hearing room charged with tension and unresolved consequences. Senator Kennedy then pushed the conversation even further. He asked whether President Biden and some Democratic lawmakers viewed undocumented foreign nationals as potential future voters. The secretary answered plainly that she believed they did. Kennedy followed with a question many Americans ask themselves. If someone opposes illegal immigration but supports legal immigration, does that make them racist? The secretary responded clearly no. Supporting legal immigration while opposing illegal entry simply reflects belief in the rule of law, the foundation on which the country was built. She confirmed that enforcing those laws is exactly what her department has been doing. Kennedy paused to clarify the record. He asked again whether the border had been secured under the current administration. The secretary confirmed that it had. He noted that many lawmakers were angry about it and accused them of claiming it was done the wrong way. When he asked whether their real frustration was that the border was secured at all, the secretary agreed. He then turned to the federal judiciary. Kennedy stated that while he believes everyone has a moral and civic duty to follow court orders, he questioned the sudden surge of national and universal injunctions aimed at stopping border enforcement. He asked where these judges were when millions of people were crossing the border illegally under the previous administration. Were any of them issuing injunctions to stop those policies? The secretary said she could not point to any specific judges who took such action. Kennedy pressed further, asking whether she could recall a single federal judge who intervened while roughly 20 million people were allowed into the country illegally. She answered that she could not. Kennedy stated that he could not recall one either, concluding that if it were not for double standards, there might be no standards at all. As Kennedy wrapped up, procedural tensions surfaced. The chair noted that his time had expired, even though other senators had been allowed to continue beyond their allotted time. Kennedy briefly finished his thought before yielding. Senator Peters then spoke up, asking for fairness in how time limits were enforced. He requested confirmation that senators would still be allowed to submit written questions for the record, and that the secretary would be required to respond. The chair confirmed that such submissions would be permitted, and that the secretary would answer them. The way she answered without hesitation triggered a reaction no one expected. The moment she said, "Yes, sir," the atmosphere in the room changed. Kennedy wasn't satisfied. You could see it in the pause, in the steady stare that lingered just a second longer than normal. It felt deliberate, as if he was waiting to see whether she would hesitate or retreat. She didn't, and that's when he asked the question that began to unravel everything. He noted that her answer clearly upset some of his colleagues. She agreed. Another brief response. Another confirmation. But beneath those simple words, tension was building fast. This was no longer just a policy disagreement or political performance. It was turning into a direct confrontation over accountability, intent, and credibility, and it was about to move into far more volatile territory. Kennedy made it clear he wasn't there for a polite conversation. He wanted the committee, the cameras, and the public to hear a specific point. He followed up with a question that barely disguised its purpose. Were critics angry because the border was secured the wrong way, or because it was secured at all? The way he framed it left no room to escape. Every camera was rolling. Every reaction mattered. The secretary stood her ground. She answered that the backlash came from how quickly and effectively the policy worked. That response gave Kennedy exactly what he was looking for, a clear admission that opened the door to his broader argument. But he wasn't finished. Not even close. His tone hardened, shifting from inquiry to accusation. He began laying out what happened when the new administration took office. According to his framing, border enforcement measures were dismantled almost immediately. He used a vivid metaphor, comparing the moment to a game show invitation, not to a stage, but into the country itself. Whether viewers agreed or not, the imagery stuck. The secretary confirmed his claims, agreeing that previous enforcement tools were rolled back. Each short yes added another layer to his case. Kennedy then turned to the political reaction. He asked whether many lawmakers celebrated those policy reversals. She confirmed they did. With every answer, he constructed a sharp contrast. One administration tightening enforcement, the next loosening it. One slowing migration, the other accelerating it. There was no middle ground in the way he framed it, and the secretary's responses reinforced that divide. Then came the moment that defined the exchange. Kennedy asked for a number how many people had entered the country illegally under the current administration. The room went still. Everyone knew what was coming next. He wasn't looking for exact figures. He was looking for impact. And when the secretary answered, she delivered it. Her estimate was staggering: more than 20 million people. It landed like a shockwave in the room. Kennedy immediately translated the number into something visual, something the public could instantly understand. "That's like adding 10 Nebraskas to the country," he said. Whether Nebraska means anything to you or not, the scale suddenly became clear. This wasn't a statistic anymore. It was 10 states' worth of people, but Kennedy wasn't done with numbers. He wanted motives. He wanted intentions. He wanted the audience to ask why decisions like this were made in the first place. So he followed up with a question that shifted the entire exchange. "Why do you think they did it?" The secretary answered without hesitation. She said she believed the driving force was an open borders philosophy. She went further, stating that other countries were sending what she described as their worst elements, and that serious threats were among those entering. She framed it as a direct danger to public safety. Kennedy seized on that response and pushed harder. That's when he delivered one of the lines that defined the entire hearing. He said there were only two possible explanations: either the administration believed in open borders, or the people running border enforcement were so incompetent he wouldn't trust them to run a snowball stand. He delivered it flatly, without theatrics, which only made it hit harder. The secretary agreed with his framing, giving him even more momentum, and Kennedy didn't let go. He pivoted again, this time toward political consequences. He asked carefully whether they viewed these undocumented migrants as potential future voters. This wasn't just a question, it was a spark. The secretary said she believed that was true. At that point, the exchange moved into even more controversial territory. While some political commentators argue that large-scale migration could eventually shift voting demographics, others strongly dispute that claim. It remains a matter of political debate rather than verified fact. But in that hearing room, Kennedy put the theory directly on the table, and the secretary aligned with him. That alignment intensified the moment, just when it seemed the exchange might slow down. Kennedy raised a question that many Americans hear repeatedly in public debates. Does opposing illegal immigration make someone racist? The secretary answered clearly, no. It was brief but deliberate. Kennedy used that moment to separate enforcement of immigration laws from accusations and labels. For a moment, the tone shifted from confrontation to clarification, but the pause didn't last. Kennedy had one more target in sight. He turned his attention next to the federal judiciary. Kennedy shifted the energy in the room once again, this time turning his focus to the courts. He asked why so many federal judges were now issuing nationwide injunctions to block border enforcement actions, yet appeared silent when illegal crossings surged in previous years. It wasn't an attack on a single ruling or a single judge, it was a challenge to the broader legal system and the role it has played in shaping border policy. The secretary responded that she could not recall judges stepping in during that earlier period. That answer gave Kennedy the opening he was clearly waiting for. He delivered the line he wanted on the record. If it weren't for double standards, there wouldn't be any standards at all. The room didn't erupt. There was no applause. Instead, there was silence. The kind of silence that lingers, heavy, focused, uncomfortable. Kennedy had landed his point, and everyone knew it, but the hearing didn't end there. Almost immediately, another senator interjected not to debate border policy, but to challenge how the rules were being enforced inside the room. He objected to the fact that Kennedy had gone over his allotted time while other senators had been cut off quickly. That complaint revealed something deeper than a scheduling issue. The tension in the hearing wasn't just ideological, it was procedural. It was personal. And it was clearly reaching a boiling point. Moments like this pull back the curtain for viewers. You don't just see the arguments, you see the atmosphere they unfold in. The interruptions. The frustration. The perception that one side is being given more space to speak than the other. When Senator Peters pushed back on the time limits, it exposed the undercurrent running through the entire hearing. This wasn't only about immigration policy. It was about control. About optics, about which narrative gets the most attention. As the committee shifted into procedural back and forth, the secretary sat quietly, having just endured one of the toughest lines of questioning of the hearing. The discussion moved on, but the impact of Kennedy's interrogation remained. Every comparison, every metaphor, every accusation was now part of the official record. Viewers didn't walk away with a dry policy debate. They witnessed a confrontation, whether people believe Kennedy exposed uncomfortable truths or simply drove his own narrative with force is up to them. But one thing is undeniable. This exchange won't fade quickly. The questions raised about the border, intent, political consequences, and enforcement are not going away. They will continue shaping hearings, headlines, and national debate for years. This hearing became a snapshot of a much larger conflict. A moment when two sharply different perspectives collided in real time on the public record for the entire country to see. And if you want more breakdowns like this, real clips, deep dives, and moments other channels skip, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. There's a lot more ahead, and you won't want to miss what happens next.